Research on disclosure includes the reactions or responses from the disclosure recipient, basically the person who the disclosure was made to. Work pioneered by Sarah Ullman starting in the 90s includes a taxonomy of all the different types of reactions that have been described by people who have disclosed. Among those are what she's termed stigmatizing responses, where the victim is treated differently, like there's something wrong with them. Now, it seemed to me that stigmatizing responses communicated a type of invalidation to the victim by invalidating their experience, their understanding or perspective of that experience, or even their decision to disclose in the first place. Marsha Linehan, an academic psychologist who developed dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT, where invalidation is a core part of conceptualizing the background of some of the people that DBT helps, noted that invalidation tells the victim that their understanding of their own experience is wrong, and that their emotional reaction, which in this case heightened negative emotions, is socially unacceptable. You can see why I made this connection to stigmatizing responses by telling someone who's genuinely upset that they're being hysterical. You're saying there must be something wrong with them if they're upset at something that people shouldn't be upset about. What this also does is it drives a wedge between the victim's understanding of their experience and an outlet to express the distress that their understanding of their own experience has produced. In other words, if it's unacceptable to be upset about a particular violating event, then it's equally unacceptable to confide in anyone that you're upset. This is the reason I was following this conceptual thread. I was trying to pin down what psychologists call the mechanism. And the mechanism in this case I was looking for is the one that creates the silence that victims have endured for decades. It seemed that invalidation was part of the picture, but not the whole picture. Invalidation is something communicated, perceived perhaps, but not felt. It's not an emotion. At the time I was researching it, there was a paper by researchers Danielle Weber and Nathaniel Herr who conducted an experiment where they got participants to write about a recent or ongoing problem they've been experiencing that's brought on a bit of distress, and that they'd swap stories with someone in the next room and write a few sentences of feedback about what they think of each other's stories. Participants didn't know it was all scripted, and that depending on what experimental condition they were assigned to, were given a note containing generic feedback that was either validating or invalidating, that was written before the participant had even signed on to do the study. Now, one of the outcome measures they were looking for was negative emotions, which in this case was measured by a questionnaire called the PANAS, which measures general negative emotionality, which they found were associated with invalidation. But when they looked at specific emotions, like guilt or sadness, the statistical analyses found no significant effect. So there was a negative emotion that invalidation creates, but it hadn't been explicitly identified in that study. This is where I picked it up. If we go back to the conceptual link between stigmatizing reaction and invalidation, we see that invalidation might create some sort of negative emotional experience by pointing out what sorts of behaviors are socially unacceptable, that is, stigmatized. Irving Goffman's landmark work on stigma describes how bearing stigma means that a person's social identity has been tainted because of some socially undesirable quality. This is where shame comes in. Shame is called a self-conscious emotion because that's exactly what it does when you feel it. It makes you much more aware of yourself as a social object. I often describe shame by contrasting it against guilt, as people often get the two confused. Guilt is something you feel when you've done something wrong, something uncharacteristic, often by mistake, like accidentally tripping a person up or cutting someone off in traffic by misjudging the gap between two cars. But where guilt is due to doing something wrong, shame is due to being something wrong. Shame is what you feel when there's something wrong with you, and that something is out there for everyone to see.